Yeah, there was cocaine from time to time as well. You know what? I mean, I'm sure there was times when we were happy, Ryan, but we would sometimes give up drinking. But when there's two of you doing it, it's like someone's always going to break and then the other one's just going to fall straight.
This is Rock Bottom with Ryan. No sugarcoating, no filters. The pain, the chaos, the truth. No bullshit. Just recovery.
Sober Strong apparel isn't just lifestyle wear, it's battle gear. Heavyweight tees, hoodies, and gear for the ones who draw a hard line. Clean, sober, no compromise. We rep sobriety like a badge of honor, and every piece you throw on says you're part of the crew that doesn't back down. Every order fuels recovery with 10% donated to treatment facilities, because we don't just talk about it, we stand on it.
All right. Welcome to Rock Bottom with Ryan. I'm here with Jimmy Thistle. He has the Recovery Jimmy podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us where you're from, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me on, man. It's good to see you again. Yeah, I'm Jimmy Thistle, recovery_Jimmy on Instagram. I'm Scottish. Lived in Scotland for the kind of majority of my life, and then I moved to England I actually lived in England for about 20 odd years, and now I live in the Isle of Man. Recently got married, and stepfather to 3 amazing kids. I'm a gardener, and 5 years 2 months sober. So yeah.
5 years 2 months. Wow,
5 years
incredible.
2 months. Yeah, in fact, I think I'm coming up on 3 months, 5 years, 3 months, but who's counting, eh? Yeah.
The first 4.5 are the hardest, apparently. Yeah. I don't know.
I mean,
No.
well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's all hard, but it's all good,
I have a friend who I from the program or whatever, who is 43 years sober, and he's just always making this joke every year. First 42 was the hardest. I'm like, great, great.
Yeah. I like that. No, I mean, I know a guy. In fact, he did the catering at our wedding. I think he's 21 years now, which is just like,
Wow.
Because when I first got sober and I'd go in the rooms and he was like 17 or 18 years, and I was like, or no, he'd have been like 16 or 17 years, and I was like, oh my God, that's just so unfathomable, at that point. But I don't want to. I don't want to wish that I have 20 years sobriety, because then I'd be whatever age I'd be, so I'm happy with 5 years, but it's amazing how quickly the time flies. So congrats on your 1 year as well, man. That's amazing news. Yeah. How did you feel?
I appreciate it. I never would have imagined I would have made it this far if I looked back a year and thought like, oh, maybe I'll make it a couple months. But then I just the time kept going by. I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah. Exactly. It does. Time ticks. And if we don't make that decision, then another year goes past and another year goes past of in the shit,
Yeah,
and that's
exactly
where we want to be.
And life keeps getting better.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
So I'm curious. I feel really privileged to have you on the show, and I appreciate you coming on. And I was, for our listeners and stuff who I would like them to get to know just your background, because I'm sure you spend a lot of time interviewing people, hearing about their stories. But one of the things when you were interviewing me a while back, was curious to hear about your background, because we talked about me, and I definitely want to hear about what your childhood was like and kind of some of the stuff that may have led into when you started, drinking, using, and all that stuff, and what was like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thanks for having me on. And it's I had kind of an idyllic childhood. I grew up in Scotland, the suburbs of Glasgow, and we were out in the country. I'm 45 now, so we're talking like the 80s, early 90s, and my parents split up when I was 6, and I've got an older brother. But we never went without. There was always food on the table. Yeah, so there's no kind of real trauma in that respect. as I say, it was an idyllic childhood. We'd go out on our bikes until the street lamps came on, and we'd have fields and fields and fields that was just our playground. Childhood was just almost perfect. You know what I mean? It was a great time, great friends. All friends lived within, like, half a mile walk down the park or whatever. Not down the park, but just from our houses. And yeah, but I think my first drink, I was around 14, and my parents, well, my mum and my stepfather were out of town, and my brother he's 2.5 years older than me. So he was having a few drinks from their drinks cabinet. And he said, "Oh, have you had a drink?" Because he'd been to a few parties with friends and that. And so he must have been about 16 and a half. And he said, "Oh, have you had a drink?" Yeah. And I was like, "Well, maybe just kind of, like the odd swig from, I don't know, mum's wine glass or stepdad's beer or something like that, but never drunk." So he gave me quite a few house measure vodka and oranges. And Ryan, I had a great time. I had a sore head the next day, but I had a great time. And I think I need to ask him about it, actually, what he remembers of that night. Because we just had a laugh. We were listening to music, very similar taste in music. And I just loved it. And I told my friends at school, and we'd heard like some other groups of kids like our age and maybe a bit older were dabbling, and they were going and going down the park or whatever. And we were kind of good kids in a way up until that point. I still were good kids, but we didn't really think that was a thing. And then I went in and I told them about this weekend. I was like, "Oh, we need to go and try this." So friends, we went and got some little bottles of cider, went up the woods that next weekend, or maybe a couple of weekends after, I think. And yeah, that was it. I was hooked,
Yeah.
not physically, not dependent or anything from that age, but I loved the buzz. I loved the confidence it gave me. It was a bit dangerous. It was just all the things that it is,
Yeah.
and it was just this is who I am, like all of my idols, I guess, were like, like Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain. I don't know if he'd actually shot himself at that point, but all these people that were like into expanding their mind and drinking to excess and all that. So now I felt like I was in that gang,
And it
and
looked fashionable in a lot of ways.
yeah, and the 90s was just, in the UK especially, we had like Britpops, we had Oasis and all that. And that was just that huge, big drinking culture. It was like, fingers up to kind of the system, and everywhere you turned on TV was just, it was just excess. It was just the 90s were just a party decade, and we were in for the long haul in that. And I guess we started smoking weed maybe around the same time. People always say that weed's like the kind of gateway drug. Alcohol is, alcohol's definitely a gateway drug. I wouldn't have started smoking weed had I not been kind of opened up into that dangerous world of underage drinking, and then I was like, well, but weed was just something we did kind of, through the week, maybe at school a little bit, but that wasn't like a kind of party drug for us. So yeah, I'd say the majority of my teen years were just kind of drinking at the weekend. As we got older, we'd maybe start going to a few different clubs. Obviously underage. I think we had fake ID, but they didn't really bother in those days to kind of ID. I mean, I had stubble when I was about 14, 15, 16. So, no, they must have known we were underage. But this club that we used to go to was called the Rat Trap. And it was kind of, excuse me, I don't know why that's going off. I've got it on silent. But anyway,
No, it's okay.
it was called the Rat Trap, and it was a kind of alternative club. It was a bit, metal, rock, kind of emo, I suppose you'd call it as well. And the majority of our like classmates were in there as well at the weekend. So that was our kind of hangout spot. We'd get the late night bus home, and yeah. But I would get into like little scrapes, not fights or anything like that, but I would do silly things, and my mum would be like, "Oh, you shouldn't be drinking," and this, that, and the other. So there was obviously stupid things that I was doing then that maybe my friends weren't getting caught for, or weren't being as kind of blasé about it as I was. So there was obviously little things back even then that were kind of, flagging up. But I didn't think there was an issue, and I don't think there was an issue. I mean, I think there's always been an issue with me. I think I've always liked it, and I've always done it to excess, where like maybe some of my friends would, I wasn't monitoring everyone else's drinks, but I would definitely be the one that was drinking the most, because the thing is, it would never really, my tolerance went up quite quickly. And even though I was quite clearly drunk, I could still function and I could still stand and have conversations with people. I never was passed out in the corner like some people would. And some people would do that and then they probably wouldn't drink again for, a month or so. But for me, it was just like, just a constant all through my life. I moved to, so we moved to, my parents and me, my brother had moved out, and my parents, my stepfather and my mother and me moved up to Aberdeen, and I went and did a bit of college, kind of, met loads of people and started drinking with them and, partying. Didn't really enjoy the college course, so I kind of quit that and then got work in a bar, and then eventually was living in the bar as well. So, it was kind of living above it. I was the assistant manager. And again, it was like we'd work at the weekend, and I don't know if we really drank behind the bar at all. I think it was just like after we finished, we would then go drinking, and obviously, if our days off were like a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, the people we'd socialize with would be people from the bar. And again, it was like there wasn't anything else in my life, like
Yeah.
hobby wise, or I'm going to go and do this hike or whatever. Now, every free time that I had really was kind of, drinking or
So
socialize, drinking.
working at the bar, living near the bar,
Yeah.
spending all the time with your friends in the bar. So it was just like nothing else really.
Nothing. Yeah. And as I say, we'd do stuff. We'd go and see bands and we'd go and see comedy nights, but it was always revolving around the kind of alcohol.
Yeah.
That relationship broke up probably to do with my drinking, but I decided to leave her and move back to Glasgow. Stayed in Glasgow for a bit. I think I had my 21st there. Again, like my 21st was out in Glasgow at a nightclub. I got into scrap with some guys in the club and ended up getting thrown out, but also then beat up by the bouncers. Like I wasn't beat up where I was lying on the floor, but I was properly kind of, black eyes and stuff like that. And then had to make my way home. And, that was my 21st birthday. But again, no red flags there, Ryan. That was someone else's fault. That wasn't me. That was just, kind of, wouldn't say I would go looking for trouble. I just went looking on adventures. Like my group of friends would be over there, but I would just always be one that was kind of going around the club and seeing what else was around, and maybe I'd said something that somebody didn't like or whatever. So that was then taken offense of, and then got into the fight. So yeah. And, again, like stayed in Glasgow for a bit. And my parents at this point had moved down South England to Cambridgeshire. So I went down with them and thought, I'll live a bit rent free with my parents for a bit. I was working two jobs. So I was working in a pub because I enjoyed pubs and I enjoyed the kind of extra cash it gave me and also the social aspect of it. And it was a hotel. So it wasn't a dive bar. It wasn't like, it was more of an old man's pub. But I enjoyed the kind of social aspect of it because there was some young people came in. One night so I'd been kind of dating this girl that would come in the bar and then we'd kind of split up and I don't know, I decided to go, I'd been in the bar for a bit and I decided to go looking for her in my car and I should have just gone home, but I went round the kind of ring roads in the town and the police, apparently I went through like a red light. I don't think it was, but they pulled me over anyway, took me down for the breathalyzer and that was my DUI, as you guys call it, drink driving offense. So so I'd lost so obviously it was 2 years that I got off. I got for that 2 years ban, but I could pay extra for 3 Saturday mornings drink driving awareness course.
Mm-hmm.
And that took 6 months off. So I paid for that and I did that. But, and I remember like there was probably like 10 of us in this room and like we were all like at the end of it, we'd go, what are you guys doing now? Oh, let's go for a pint. Because none of us could drive, so we all went for a pint. It wasn't like, maybe we should probably, I didn't know these guys from Adam. There were some old guys, some young guys, whatever. But anyway, the job that I was doing at that point, I couldn't do anymore because I was a forklift driver and I had to cross like a public highway in the forklift and you needed a driver's license for that. So I was like, man. So they were like, we can't employ you anymore. So I was like, shit. What am I going to do? And then I suddenly decided that I'd seen a photography course in the college that was local. And I was like, right. And my parents were like, no, right, this is good. You should use this as like a kind of turning point in your life. And I was like, yeah, okay. So I went to college, I did photography, did really well with that and loved it. I think I did. My parents did ask me to go to an AA meeting at one point after the DUI. And I remember going in and we were there in the first half. And this guy came up to me, like in the break, we're getting coffee and having a cigarette. And he came up to me and he said, I don't think you're an alcoholic. And I was 21 at this point. He goes, I don't think you're an alcoholic. And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, you don't have that like 1,000-yard, like haunted stare that everyone else in this room has. And he says, I think you're wasting your time here. And I was like, all right, okay. So I did the rest of the meeting. Then my parents picked me up and I was like, Mum, I'm not an alcoholic. This guy's just told me that. Like looking back, what a, like this guy had never met me before in his life. And how dare he? Like, there's no way I would say that to someone coming into a meeting for the first time,
Very
regardless
bold
of the
statement.
age. Yeah. Like, maybe if I had hung around those meetings, like maybe my life would be completely different. But, I'm kind of glad that he did say that to me. And I was like, yeah, I'm not an alcoholic, and I don't think I was at the time. I enjoyed drinking and I enjoyed the buzz. But I didn't have, and I guess it's a maturity thing as well. I think I only started maturing when I got sober. I didn't have that kind of thought process of consequences at that age, and I
Yeah.
just thought, I just want to go and enjoy myself. Like, fuck tomorrow. It doesn't really matter what's going to happen then. I'll deal with that when it comes, It was like, live fast, die young, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I did the college course and I ended up getting a really good job doing photography in Cambridge. Got myself a little flat, and yeah, life was good. But I kind of took the pedal off the gas. I should have been doing, and at this point, like my drinking wasn't out of control. I would maybe have a few drinks with friends. I'd still party, but it wasn't like a daily thing, and it wasn't. I was just enjoying myself,
How much do
and
you
I
think
was.
you were drinking? And like, was it mainly just like, those few nights a week where you drink really hard and then take the rest of the week off? Or was it consistently like, 6 to 10 drinks a night? Or what do you think?
No, in those days, before I moved into the big flat in Cambridge, I was still living with my parents, so it would be. I don't think I'd drink much at all through the week. I can't. Was I still working? I wasn't working at the pub anymore. I was. Yeah, when I was at college, it was just maybe we'd go down to the town at lunchtime or something, have a pint or two. If my friend was giving me a lift home, we'd maybe stop at the pub and he'd have one because he was driving and I'd maybe have like two, but that would be it for the rest of the night. And then, yeah, I'd go out with friends at the weekend and, if there was a little bit of coke or some ecstasy, we'd maybe do that, but it wasn't like every weekend. I would say the drinking at the weekend was pretty consistent. So it'd be like Friday, Saturday night, and then off Sunday, and then back to college or work Monday. So those were the kind of things that we did. But then when I got the job in Cambridge and I moved into like a really nice house share with some really cool guys. So basically, one of the guys that was kind of guarantor of the place, he was like interviewing the new recruits for living there, and we were sat there, and he was like, he's a Frenchman, and he said, do you want a gin and tonic? And I was like, yeah, I'll have a gin and tonic. So I was like, cool, this is nice. And then he said, do you party? And I was like, party? Like, what do you mean? And he goes, oh, yeah, I party. So we partied. And then, so that went on in that kind of flat. And it was a real party house. And it just kind of opened up my kind of floodgates again.
Yeah.
I was living in this house, had a really good job. We had beers in the fridge at work because there was some Americans that had this company over in the UK. And because in America, this would have been 2006, I think,
Yeah.
2005, 2006. Like there was no way in America that you could drink in the office or do anything like that. So when they came to the UK, and it's changed now in the UK, but back then it was like, yeah, you can have beers in the fridge and have a bit of a party and all that. So they just embraced this. So I was like, wow, let's go for it. But strangely, one of the girls that worked there, she gave me this book to borrow, and it was called A Million Little Pieces by James Fry. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
I haven't heard of it. No. No.
It's
I'll write it
it's an
down.
amazing book, and he actually got he was on it. It was one of the Oprah, like, top 10 bestsellers, Oprah kind of stamp on it and all that. And then it turned out that even though it was a memoir, he'd fabricated some of it. So there was this huge big outcry, and Oprah was like, I'm taking it off my list and all this. And it was like, it's still an amazing story. And I don't know how much of it's true and how much is not, but he did live that life, and he went through that form of recovery. He did spend like X amount of days in the treatment center and all that. And it's a great book. Anyway, so she gave this book to me, and I read it, handed it back to her, and went, yeah, it's a really good book. Like, she was clearly trying to send me a message at this point, like saying, I think you have a problem. But I just took no heed of it. And then just continued partying on. Now, the guy that had got me into the flat, and then the other lot, they all kind of decided to move out, and I was like, well, I don't really want to. He was like, well, you can take over the reins of this place. It's quite a good deal. So I had some more people come in. It wasn't quite as much of a party house, but there was a lot of whining in evenings, and then eventually, towards the end of my time there, it was mostly just room dwellers that were staying there. So I was just in my room drinking wine every night, going to work, really not doing any photography, not doing any arty stuff, not being creative, and just kind of, yeah, and I was like mid to late 20s, and really not doing anything in my life. Whereas I'd started off, and I'd left college with this, like, like I got student of the year, and I got distinctions and all of this, and I could have been doing so much more with it. But I just thought, I've made it. This is it. This is a great life. I've got good money coming in, blah, blah, blah. I've got party time. So yeah, I just kind of stopped trying, and I just thought things are just gonna fall in my lap, but they really didn't, and the kind of wheels started to come off.
How old were you at this point?
So 27.
27.
I quit that job, the photography job, because I was looking to start another one down in London, and I was going to move down to London. It then turned out that job was like a crock of shit. It was mostly a sales job, and it wasn't. So I was like, I paid this deposit down in a flat in London, which I lost. Luckily, I still had my flat in Cambridge. And I ended up doing this job as a kind of, like, I would take people around these different flats, like an estate agent type thing. You call them a realtor, but it was mostly for rentals. So I was like, I was up here, and no offense to people that do that job, it's a great job, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And suddenly I was from here to here, and the depression was kicking in. All of my friends at this point that had been in the party house, so we're talking like 2-3 years later, they're all moving on with their lives and kind of getting married and having
Growing
kids
up
and
and all
stuff,
that.
like growing up, and I'm still doing the same old stuff, and it just wasn't doing me any good. But I did have this little group of friends that I could still go out drinking with, although that had kind of changed people and whatnot. But I could always find people that would want to kind of go and drink hard, But eventually I just kind of thought, I'm done with this place. I'm done with Cambridge. It's not serving me anymore. My brother was over here in the Isle of Man, so I decided to come over here for, I don't know how long I decided to come for, but he was like, you know what, you're not doing anything over there. You're drinking too much. I think my family were starting to get worried about me. And I was like, no, you're right. I'll come over there for a bit and see what's going on. And yeah, I moved over here and got kind of, a decent job in a bank. I don't think I stopped drinking, because my brother liked a few beers. So we'd have beers in the house, but he was like, just be careful if you go out, when you start to meet friends over here, just be careful when you're going out, and don't go hell for leather. And I got into fitness. I was getting into running, and life was pretty sweet. I was doing well at the job. I got promoted, and, I was like, yeah, this is good. But I don't know, like banking, like any industry, there's a big drinking culture if you look for it. And I found it, and it started kind of, really kind of worming its way back in, and I just let it, I don't think I consciously thought, oh, I should be careful about this. I think I just thought, well, I'm having a good time again. I was 28, 29. I was started seeing a girl who was living in London. I'd known her from Cambridge, and we were having like a kind of long distance thing. And I would get flights backwards and forwards to do with my job. So I'd go and see her, and then she would do the same. She would come over and visit me here, and we had some good times. There wasn't really any big issues that were kind of drink related until there was.
Okay. How'd
Fell
that
out.
go exactly? How'd that
Well, I
progress?
fell out with my brother, so much more so that he kicked me out. And then I moved in with these girls from work. I ended up falling out with them. And then I moved into another place with some guys who were just like off the scale, drinking. So this was good for me. But then I was really not performing at work. And at this point, I'd started drinking cough medicine because in the morning, like I didn't know what withdrawal was, but obviously because at this point I was drinking daily, and I would drink that to get me through work, because I would drink that. No one could smell the alcohol on me. They just smell cough medicine. So I drink that, get me through work. Then I go home and then just, have at it. This started taking a toll on my work. I got overlooked for the kind of end of year bonuses, and it was a bit shit. They didn't even tell me. They just we'd all be sat in the office, and each person was then called in to go and speak to the boss and see how much they were getting Christmas bonus or whatever it was. And then it got to the end of the day, and then they were like, oh yeah, you're not getting one. I was like, you could have like told me that at the beginning and not like just had me sitting here all day. And I probably didn't deserve it because I was phoning in sick a lot and not
Yeah.
really performing at work. So much so that I was just like, I think we had a chat and it was like, well, where do you see this going? And I was like, yeah, it's probably best if I just kind of handed my notice. And I think they were like, yeah. So I wasn't strictly fired, but I don't think it had lasted longer
Were
than
you
much
ever
there.
showing up to work intoxicated, or was it mainly just like you were showing up hungover and just not performing?
Showing up hungover, never drank apart from the cough medicine on the job. No, that wasn't till later. Yeah, this one, yeah. So as I say, I handed my notice in, and then the girlfriend in London was like, "Well, just come over here." I was like, "Right, yeah." Like, I'm glad you said that because I'm done with this place. You see the pattern. Like, I think we call them geographicals, don't we? So it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll move to London. London will be
Problems
good.
happen, you run,
Yeah, yeah.
start
So it was
fresh, right?
like this kind of 2-year cycle thing. So funnily enough, I'd moved out the place with the guys. I was now living in my last place. Like, I think I'd fallen out with these guys as well. So I was living with another mate, and I was only going to stay there for a week before I then got my ferry over. Now we had a big leaving do for me at the bank. Well, just with my close friends and stuff. I got so shit faced that I woke up the next day, had to get all my worldly possessions together, get myself down to the ferry, to get a ferry to then get trains and all these down to London. And I missed the ferry. I saw it going out and I was like, so
Jeez.
like whatever little money that I had, I then had to buy a flight and then another connection down to London. So like by the time I arrived down to start this new life with my girlfriend, was like, like broke as a joke. And it was like, she was like, no, don't worry about it. It's all good. It's all good. She was a drinker, and she had a really good job. And she was like, don't worry about it. Things are going to be better here for you now. Like, she knew all the stuff that I was going through, whether or not she was like, maybe he drinks too much. But we were all big drinkers. And then I moved to London, and London's a massive big drinking city. All of her friends quickly became my friends, and again, it was just like party. So I was like, I found my tribe again, and so that lasted about maybe 2 years. And I don't think we never split up because of my drinking. We split up just because we ended up just becoming kind of like roommates, But again, I did go through a number of jobs down there because, Ryan, I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy doing what I was doing. And looking back now, I think a lot of my drinking was to do with whatever job I would just end up in, because it wasn't like my chosen career. I wasn't doing photography. I was working in a bank. I was in a call center. I was doing recruitment for like, public sector housing, just not doing what I wanted to do. Like, I would do quite well in the jobs, and then I'd be like, why am I doing this? This is not
Yeah,
this is
just
not
wasn't
who I
passionate
am.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So all I wanted to do was count down those hours until 5 o'clock or or till it was Friday, and then I could go and drink. But she and I were drinking like in the flat all the time. And again, we turned it into a bit of a party flat because it was one of the nicest flats that, our friends and us had. And we were quite central as well. So when we broke up, I decided to stay in London, got another job, moved over to the other side of London. But it was quite a different existence because I didn't know that many people in London, and where I was living was kind of a bit out. And I was just living with some housemates that, again, were kind of room dwellers. And I was just drinking up in my room, going to the local pub. I think I got asked to leave a couple of times, but they didn't bar me as such. They were just like, you're kind of, yeah, because I'd be in there on my own, and I just want to kind of meet people and be social. But people don't, if they're in a group of people, they don't want some kind of, solo guy coming over and pestering them when he's had a bit too much. So yeah, that was a bit of a low point. And eventually I was like, right, I'm going to tail between my legs, go. My parents, they moved about a bit. They were back up in York at this point. I decided to go and, live with them for a bit. I decided to go back to uni and do film studies. I was like, yeah, new start, Ryan, new start. This is what we'll do. Uni was good for a bit. I kind of stayed away from the whole freshers week, which is, the first week. And they're all like 18, 19, I was 32 at this point. So I met a good few people at uni, but, I would kind of do most of my drinking in my dad's pub in the local. So I met a lot of people my age in there. And that's where I would do a lot of my drinking, because me and my dad would walk up to the pub. It was super cheap in there. And I met some good people. We'd go to like little house parties. Yeah, uni was all right. I didn't finish it because I met someone in the second year. I met her in a bar, and it was just pure carnage from the beginning. She was into this and into that, and yeah, what did
Just
we
toxic for each other kind of
just
thing.
toxic? Yeah, did we love each other? I don't know. I think we just enjoyed getting off our heads, and it was like no one would question. I wouldn't question her drinking, and she wouldn't question my drinking. So it was like, here we
It's kind of
go.
a safe zone for both of you.
Absolutely. We thought it was like a match made in heaven, but it was actually a recipe for disaster. We stayed together quite a number of years. We moved around a bit. We got a couple of cats. I've still got Poppy. She's 11, 12 now, I think. So it was a while ago. And
She's got some stories to tell too, I assume.
she's got some stories to tell. We ended up having a pub, and we this was down in the Peak District. We ended up having this pub. I was the landlord. She didn't have an official title, but she was kind of doing some of the cooking and stuff. We didn't have any staff because it had kind of been this rundown pub that no one was really going into. But I started getting a lot of the locals to come back into it. And I was drinking behind the bar and this, that, and the other. And we were trying to make it work, but we were having our own issues. And I remember we'd fallen out. We'd organized this like open mic night, and we'd fallen out. So I'd been like drinking during the day, and then people started descending on the pub, and they were like setting up. And I remember like later on that night, just looking up at the bar and seeing people just behind there, like pouring their own drinks, and there was no money going in the till. It was just a free for all. And I was just like, I don't care. I was like, I was gone. I was like, what's the worst that can happen? Anyway, I wake up the next day. Who's banging on the pub door? So I go down, and it's the police. And I'm looking around the place like this is the first I've seen it. I don't remember going to bed. Complete blackout. There's beer bottles, there's glasses, there's a window pane smashed, there's just stuff everywhere, and the place is just like like a bomb site. I wish I'd taken some pictures, but
so it was like a bar night that just got out of control at your own pub,
like an open mic night. So there was just people playing music, but it was just like I didn't expect that many people to descend on the bar. And then and because I was the only member of staff, and because I was then pissed at that point when, everyone started coming in, I was just like, because the way I treated it, like it was like my house, like my front room. And I didn't own the bar. I didn't own any of the booze that was behind there. I was just an employee, but I just kind of felt, oh, this is my home. I'll do what I want with it. And I'd given up caring at that point because she'd gone, she was staying at a friend's. She'd had an altercation with some other girl the night before, and the police wanted to speak to me about that. So they took me down the station. So I was just absolutely like hanging. And then I got home later on that night. My friend came round and I said, listen, man, can you go down the shop and get me some cigarettes? And he said, I don't have my car. I said, like, take mine. So I think it was February. So there was some ice in the ground and he's gone for like ages. And it's like 10 minutes down the road and he's gone for like 40 minutes. And I'm like, so eventually he rolls back in and he's like, oh man, I've like totaled your car. I was like, you've done what? You've what? He's like, yeah, slipped on some ice and I like spun it and all that. Now, he made out that like he was obviously like absolutely gunning it, you know, and
Yeah.
and obviously took a turn the wrong way and then flipped
He
it.
was sugarcoating it, making it sound like, oh
Yeah, making it out that it was always bad ice. And I was like, and then I just, at that point, I remembered like when I've been in the car, when he's driving his own car, he drives like an absolute maniac. And I was like, of course he's not going to respect my car. He's just going to, you know, go for it. So the next day, the pub landlords come round and basically give me my marching order. They took my phone, my laptop, and my camera to basically hold until I could pay them back for the money that was, you know, the alcohol that was basically taken from the bar. They basically came and did a quick stock take because they could see the place was wrecked. I hadn't even really made an effort to clean it up. So they were like, yeah, you need to get out of here. So I then had to get in my car with like a few of my belongings. The back windscreen is out. The wing mirror's hanging off. The wings all dented in. It still drove, but like I'm driving like an hour
just
and
to
a
make
half.
you feel even more low, you know?
Yeah.
Hopping into that thing. Jeez.
Hop into that thing and I've got to drive like an hour and a half up to my parents with like the wind just in February, like blowing because there's no back windscreen. And it was like, so yeah, so at this point I've gone back to my parents' house again and yeah, just cut a long story short, I did get sober and I stayed sober for about 70 days, I think, at that point.
Okay.
And it was quite poignant because when I was back home, my grandfather, who was like 95 at that point, and he was still out doing things, painting fences, doing this. He was still really, and then he took an infection and he just went downhill really fast. And within, I would say, like a month or two, I think he was gone. And
Wow.
you know, I was so because he knew that I'd had issues in the past with alcohol. Like at this point, like my whole family knew that, like, you know, there was a problem there, and it was like, what are you going to do about it? Oh yeah, I'll fix it. And then it would be like, no, I've not fixed it. Are you going to fix it? And you know, so we'd had fallouts with my grandfather and stuff, and then so to be there and you know have that time with him, and I was sober was so special for him and for me, you know, to be there when you know and just have that sober time. So yeah, it didn't last. That girl and me kind of did. We were back on and off for a while, and she was going through a lot of anxiety. She was drinking on that. So as much as I was then trying to stay sober, she was then asking me to get a bottle of vodka because she was staying at my parents' house at this point. We'd moved everything out of the pub. Sorry if I'm jumping all over the place, right?
No, this is good.
It's so yeah, so she'd be like laid up in bed, not even speaking to like my parents who were in the same house. We should be like, and then I've got to go and say to my parents, well, she's got anxiety. So I'm defending her. All the while I'm coming in from work with a bottle of vodka for her because that's going to fix her anxiety. So then I would start drinking as well. And it's like, you know, I'm not blaming her, but it was kind of just, we were a toxic waste of time and effort. We eventually kind of did, you know, separate and break up and that was done. And then I started getting,
How long did that last altogether?
so we started seeing each other in 2013 and that would have been about 2017, I think. So yeah, about 3.5 years, something like that. Yeah, maybe longer. But it was just volatile, and the drinking was just, yeah, like it was like every night. We started off on 4 bottles of wine for a tenner, and then we quickly moved on to whiskey, and then I think it was just vodka. So yeah,
You guys were
we're
kind of just
talking
feeding off of each other and
just feeding off each other. Yeah, there was cocaine from time to time as well. You know what? I mean, I'm sure there was times when we were happy, Ryan, but we would sometimes give up drinking. But when there's two of you doing it, it's like someone's always going to break and then the other one's just going to fall straight. So,
Yeah.
it's like, oh,
And did that happen because I had that experience a long time ago in my 20s when I was trying to quit as well, and it was a toxic relationship in my it's my ex marriage or whatever, and we every time one of us would try to cut back or control ourselves, the other one would still go off the deep end. So then the other one would get tired of trying to be sober and then fall back into it, and then the other one would try, and then it would just go on this like circle,
yeah.
every time, never on the same page at the same time.
No, exactly that. And I don't think we ever lasted probably longer than like 2 or 3 days. It wasn't any real effort being put into this kind of giving up thing. It was just like, let's get sober for a couple of days, or let's get sober. And as soon as because we were still like in our early, 30s. So we're like, a couple of days and we'd be feeling fine again. I
Hmm.
did have a seizure in that time at one point. Now,
So
it
you
was
did suffer
definitely,
from a lot of the alcohol withdrawal symptoms and
yeah, it
stuff.
was definitely alcohol related. So, but we never put it down to that. The doctors didn't put it down to that. I don't think they even asked me what my drinking habits were like at that point, but they were through the roof.
If doctors ask me anything, I would always never tell the truth.
No,
I mean, I'd,
no.
I'd always sugarcoat. Yeah, I have a few drinks a week, but no, I had a few drinks before I came here. It's
Yeah,
kind of the
exactly. Yeah,
thing.
yeah. Like we can smell it on you, but they don't seem to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I kind of, I was back living at my parents. I got another job. She was well out of the life, but then I started socializing again and had some drinking buddies at work. And then I met this girl, woman. It was a little bit younger than me. She's maybe 10 years younger than me. And she was lovely. It was like, wow, this is amazing, and she's young and she wants to go out with this old guy. I mean, I was 38, it's
Hmm.
not old at all. And, but we started going out, and the first date we went out, my plan was to kind of go and have a few drinks, like the nice, like charming date. Like she turned up and she was pissed, but she was fun pissed. And it was
Yeah.
like, and she was just like, what are you talking about? You're going to drive home? No, you're not. You're going to stay on my sofa or whatever. And we're going to have an absolute amazing night. And we did. We had this, like, I hadn't been out for a long time. Well, I hadn't been out and had that much fun for a long time. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. But then it became, that was all we did. And this was like maybe like a month or two that we were seeing each other for, and it was just like all the time. And I was like, I said to her, listen, I don't want to, like, it's no, like, I think you're amazing, but I just don't want to start going down that path
You're
again. And
exhausted from it, and she's
I'm
just kind of
exhausted.
in those core
Yeah.
years.
And I was kind of like, I'm trying to get myself healthy, and I'm trying to be good. I was doing a lot of running at this point, and I think I'd signed up to like a couple of 10Ks and then a half marathon and then a marathon at like the end of the summer. And this was like January, February or whatever. So I was like, I'm gonna call it quits now. And she was like, all right. And then I would get these text messages saying, oh, we can do other things and all that. And I was like, listen, I just need a bit of space just now and all that. You know how it goes. Anyway, there's one night she rocked up at my parents' house, and she was like, my parents were in bed. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'd heard this like tapping at the window, like stones or whatever. And I went out, and I was like, I got her in the kitchen, and she was just like absolutely out her head. And I was like, fuck. And she's driven here, and I'm like, man. I was like, I don't know what you expect. Like, I was angry because I was like, I don't know what you expect from this. Like, I've already told you that like the drinking was maybe an issue and I didn't want to go down that path, and now you're rocked up at my house like drunk.
Yeah.
And I'm like what the fuck? And I was like, are you okay to go home? Like, in hindsight I wished I'd put her in the spare room, and just said like, sleep it off and go back tomorrow. Like, my parents would have been cool, they'd have understood, but I was like angry at her, and I was like, nah. I was like, are you okay to get home? She was like, yeah, 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 of course. And I knew that she'd done it like a lot of times before, like the drink driving.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So you weren't like it was a different kind of night or
yeah,
anything. You're like, she'll be all right. Text me when you get home or something.
exactly. And I was starting, and that was the other thing, I was starting like a new job the next day. So I was like, I want to be kind of, yeah, I've had a good night's sleep for that. So anyway, I got up the next day, and I know she texted me that night when she got home. I said, text me when you got home. So she did, and she said, yeah. I'm home now, not that you care. I'll see you on the flip side. And I was like, good. I was like, well, we will go out for a coffee at some point soon or something like that. I think that was the message. And the next day I woke up and I was getting ready for work, and I got a phone call from her housemate to say that the police and ambulance were around and that she'd hanged herself.
My Jesus.
Yeah. So I was just like, are you shitting me? Like, what the hell? So I went into where I was living, and like the police wanted to speak to me because, like I think they looked at her phone and she did text messages and all that. So obviously I phoned my agency and said, listen, I'm not able to come into this job. I went, spoke to the police, and then I just went to some bars and got myself very, very, very drunk. My drinking really did kind of take off pretty badly after that. Like, it was an excuse and it was a reason to drink, but for me it was like, if ever there's been a reason to drink, then this is it, and I'll be fucked if anyone's gonna stop me. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
this selfish alcoholism is like going, this has happened to me. It didn't happen to me, it happened to her. Like, I don't think she meant to do it. I think it was a cry for help, and I think it was like a horrible accident, a horrible tragic accident, that something went wrong in what she was doing, and
Yeah.
this is the outcome. And it's still I'm still absolutely gutted. And it was like, what,
I mean, it just
7
kind
years
of
ago?
shows that like she must have definitely been dealing with a lot more, issues
Yeah.
and issues in their heads and instability before you even were a part of her life. So it was like not a lot of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for a long time, I did kind of blame myself, but I was like, she was dealing with a bipolar sister. Her mum wasn't well. She was a nurse, so she had to deal with a lot of stuff like that. And yeah, she was consuming a lot of drugs and alcohol. So all of that was like a recipe for, tragic disaster. But I did go through that whole phase of just blaming myself. Like, what if I put her in the spare room? And what if could I be nicer in the breakup? Or what if I hadn't broken up? Do you know what I mean? All of these things. And it was just
I
like,
had something similar. I'll let you continue. This
no,
reminded
no,
me of
no.
something that took place in my early 20s. I, I was kind of seeing a girl off and on, mainly not established as a relationship, but more of kind of like, we would be hook up with each other, for,
Mm-hmm,
a
mm-hmm,
couple of months, pretty consistently and all that. And she started to develop feelings. I was not developing the feelings where I was like, I wanted a relationship. So one night she had contacted me and said, well, if you don't want a relationship, I still want to, at least hook up with you and stuff. And I was like, I just said, I don't want to make things any more complicated since we're developed, I don't want to develop feelings and make it more confusing. So I just don't think, I think we should just take some time apart, be friends later on when we're ready or something. And she said, okay. But she was at the bar that night and she had asked me if she could come over. And I said, no, I just want my space, and I find out she had left the bar and got on one of the kind of most dangerous freeways in the Seattle area, coming from this town outside of Seattle, and was apparently driving. I don't know if she was on the way to my house, but it seemed like the direction she was going was on the way to my house. But she left the bar drunk, and her sister and friends tried to stop her, but she left anyways.
mm-hmm.
And they were so concerned about her that they actually called the police because she was being so erratic. They called the police and said, hey, my sister's driving this car. Can you please just go stop her? I don't care if you give a DUI, but she's dangerous right now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And she got, as she was getting pulled over, she pulled her car over, and the cop was getting out of the car. And before the cop could get to her window, she pulled out her gun and shot herself in the head and just committed suicide right then and there. And it's like, God, I heard about it the next morning, and I was just like, oh my gosh, if I would have simply said, hey, let's chat tomorrow or something, or hey, I'll come pick you up or something. If I did something differently, so it was, for a while, it was hard to kind of like say that I didn't play a
Yeah.
role in this, so.
Yeah. No, and it's horrible. And we do kind of, blame ourselves. And, for a long time, well, straight after it, her housemate and me were, we would go drinking and kind of, I don't know, reminisce, commiserate and whatever. And then for a long while after, I've had to block her on so many different kind of socials because she would just send me messages basically saying it was my fault and all of this kind of stuff. I mean, she's kind of really, she did find my recovery page one time a few years ago and said, I ain't jumping on your sober bandwagon or something, like, how dare you, and this, that, and the other. And it was like, really, like, you're obviously still hurting over this, like, and I get that, like, we're all still hurting, but you're still in that immediate, like, toxic
Yeah.
state that you were in straight after it. And like I hope she gets better, but it's like, I've learned to kind of live with it and not blame myself quite as much as I did back in the day. But it was a tragic accident as far as I see, and there's no one to blame at all. But yeah, but my drinking did kind of escalate with that. I was doing a lot of the running, and I decided to do it for a mental health organization, in kind of memory of her and funding of that. But I met my now ex partner at that point, and my drinking did kind of calm down when I met her. She had 2 kids, and we would go camping, and we'd do lots of different things.
And at this point,
We
you're in like early 40s ish or
I
something.
wasn't 40. No, I was still 38 at this point.
38. Okay.
Yeah, this is probably about 6 months after that lady, but it was a really good relationship, and we were really happy. She ended up getting falling pregnant quite quickly into a relationship. I think we were like 2 or 3 months in, and we decided that I was going to move in with her and our 2 kids, and it was great. And the night that I moved in, she had a miscarriage, and it was like, and I'd like the previous toxic relationship, she couldn't have children, so I just kind of resigned myself that I was never going to have kids. And then at 38, suddenly, like, and I think we were due to go for the 12-week scan on the Monday to be able to, kind of announce it and tell people. And then she lost it that weekend. And I just started a new job near where we lived, and I just phoned in sick, and I just started using it as another excuse to drink. Like, obviously I was going through stuff, and I probably should have got some therapy with any of the different things, but my therapy was alcohol. It was always what I turned to. And
Same.
yeah, I just did that.
Such a easy, immediate numbing effect, You just
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
goes away just for a
Everything
minute.
goes away until it doesn't. And I think, with her, my drinking kind of did escalate really towards the end in that relationship. So for 2 years, basically, until I was 40, it just got worse and worse and worse because I was going through different jobs. I'd either get laid off or I would quit. This is when I did a lot of car drinking. So I'd go, like, leave the house for work, and she'd go off to work, and the kids would go to school, and then I would convince myself, right, this is the last time. I'm going to go and get vodka today, because I was obviously withdrawal at this point. So I'd go get vodka today, and I didn't really know about withdrawal. I just thought, oh, it's just a really bad hangover. I thought, I'll go get vodka today, and then I'll sit in my car, not too far from the house, and then tomorrow I'll go to work. And this would just go on and on and on, weeks and weeks and weeks. New job, and then I would try and get sober again, because she knew there was an issue at this point. She would definitely think, well, let's do something about this. And then I would stay sober for like 2 or 3 weeks, and I'd look in the mirror and I wasn't grey anymore, and I'd be like, okay, this hasn't killed you. The thing
And I'd
with
be like, I can do this again.
I could do this again. And the thing with her was, it wasn't that I don't think she wanted to admit that I was an alcoholic. I think she wanted to, me to kind of calm it down. And I think we thought there was a way of me doing that, but there really wasn't. And I think if we were to admit that I was an alcoholic, it would mean there'd be no drink in the house for her. I think she wasn't a big drinker, but she liked the odd glass of wine here and there. But this is really where my secret drinking came in. So I would go and get us a bottle of wine, and we'd sit and drink that. But my tolerance was quite high, although I'm sure she would definitely see that I was getting more drunk than what half a bottle of wine, between us would do. Because I'd had vodka in the bathroom, and hidden in the cistern or behind the stem of the sink. So yeah, that went on for a good couple of years until I was 40, and then it just got so bad that I decided to leave her. I was like, nah, I'm gonna go and live with my friend now, because he won't have a problem with me drinking. I knew him from school, but he did. Of course, he did. Because you don't want to have a new housemate that's drinking in their bedroom all the time. And that then became quite quickly. It became an issue that my parents were involved in, my ex was involved in, my brother and his partner were involved in. Everyone was kind of talking behind my back about what to do.
Intervention kind of thing.
Intervention type thing, and eventually they put me into a detox center, and 3 days after that the first lockdown started. So you kind of get the idea of the time scale, and it was great. And I was like, right, I was like, right, I'm gonna do this. And then I thought, I can get myself clean, sober. I can get my ex back, because we were still talking, we were still in
Still
cahoots,
cared about her.
still cared about her. She went through to meet my friend who had been staying with to get Poppy the cat back. And I said, listen, you can, because her car was broken. And I was like, take my car, you do that. So her and this guy met for the first time. Anyway, I was in the detox center and blah, blah, blah. And then I just got this little inkling when I was in there that they're both not really messaging me as much. And I know we're in COVID and lockdown and all that, but then where it says on WhatsApp, like last seen online, like both of theirs disappeared. It was like, I can't see when they were last online. And I'm like, what's going on here? So I was like, no, deal with your recovery. This is what you're focused on. Anyway, I did my 28 days, came out, went and stayed with a friend down in Nottingham. She's an old family friend. She's amazing. And when I arrived at the door, she had like full kind of hazmat suit on and wanted to hose me down, because we didn't know what this COVID was. Anyway, cut long story short, my ex said, no, there's no chance of us getting back together. I was on my way back up to move into my new flat. And she told me that. And I was like, so I went straight out to the shop, bought myself some vodka, some beers. I even bought some alcohol-free stuff in case someone came to the door and said, oh, are you drinking? You smell like
And just be
alcohol. I'll
like,
be like,
no, just have this.
just having this. Yeah. So anyway,
So this was
just,
after like 28 days.
so this was
in
55 days since I
55
went
days,
into
okay.
the rehab. So I then was getting so wound up and paranoid about my ex and my friend, like doing stuff behind my back and all that. And they were like, no, you're completely off the
Just
scale.
paranoia.
You're paranoid. This is it. You're making it up, blah, blah, blah. And then and when like, if you're hurting and you're drinking and you're looking for something that you're going to find something that's going to hurt you. And I was going out of my mind, man. Because like, there was no one to stop me drinking. My parents were over here, done my rehab, but they were like, we're not going to do that again. And I was just like, and the whole world was in lockdown. Nobody knew what was going on. So my daily trips to the shop to get me booze was kind of, and I was talking to some of the neighbors over the fence and all that, social distancing. But my main focus was like, you guys are fucking lying to me, and I know it. And I was sending horrible messages. I was getting blocked and this and that. And then there was one day when I managed to look on her Instagram, even though I think I was blocked. And I saw a photo of her literally in the next town from where I was, where he was living. And I was like, and it was like, and
Confirmed everything.
this whole big post saying, I will not live in fear of somebody, constantly accusing me of things. I'm just going to say it and I'm out, do you know what I mean? It was like, here I
Yeah.
am, I'm doing it. And I was just like, oh my fucking God.
Just a big slap to the face.
Slap to
Confirmed
face.
all your thoughts.
Yeah. So I went round his house and he was like not answering the door. Anyway, long story short, I had to email him to say, listen, man, I just want to talk to you. Like, I want to talk to you man to man. I've known you since I was like 15. So why can't you just come out and talk to me? Anyway, the next thing, the police arrive and they took me down to the station, arrested me for stalking and harassment, because apparently if you send more than 3 unsolicited texts or messages, it's stalking and harassment. So I was
Wow.
in this jail cell for I don't know how many hours, withdrawing, detoxing, in an absolute mess. Basically, it was thrown out because, like, I went and spoke to the officers and like interviewed, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't really know why you're in here. Like, okay, you're obviously hurting. You sent a few messages. You haven't really threatened anyone. Blah blah blah. We don't think you're a threat to a danger to anyone, so we're gonna let you go." And they let me go. The first thing I did when I got home was like go and get some wine. I was then booked on a ferry to come over here, and I got over here. The borders were closed, but they were allowing people in with a special exemption, which my mum had managed to get. So I managed to get over here. I had to do 2 weeks detox because of the COVID restrictions. And then I was 2 weeks sober. Like, I'd done the detox, like it was a cold turkey detox, which I probably shouldn't have done, but like,
Yeah,
fuck it,
scary, but
done it. Yeah. So the first thing I did was, it was a lovely day. I thought, I'll just go and get myself just a little small bottle of vodka, and that'll be the last. And then I was straight back on it, which was like another 3-4 weeks until it was just like my parents were ready to throw me out and do whatever. My brother came and found me. I was up the north of the island somewhere. He took me to
at this point
hospital.
you're like 40.
40 exactly, yeah. So
Oh.
I was 40 in the February of that year, and this was August. So my brother took me to hospital. They couldn't detox me. They couldn't give me Librium because every time I was blowing breathalyzer, it was still high, because I was going to the shop and topping myself up, but wasn't telling the nurses that. So they sent me home with a note that said, you have to administer, this was from my parents, you have to administer, Jimmy, 40 mil of vodka like 8 or 9 times a day. So my mum was doing that, and I was like, they're buying me. They've got to
I
buy
got
me.
one of those things too, where they tapered me off of alcohol
Tapering
by
it
giving
off.
me alcohol.
Yeah. And it was like, and I was like, oh, they're going to buy me Smirnoff. They're going to buy me the good stuff rather than the crap vodka I've been drinking up at this point. So anyway, so that lasted like, I think 2 days until I then went, because it wasn't enough for me. I went to the
No.
shop and started drinking more, ended up passed out at a friend's house, I think. And then my mum was like, we're going to the hospital. So they could keep me in, and they kept me in. And then they said, well, they started giving the Librium, and I was like, the relief, Ryan. It was just like,
I remember that. And I would beg for that stuff when I was in the hospital. I was like, wow, just give me more. Shoot it into my system,
but just the relief, the mental torture, because I knew, and I said to myself, this time I am going to do everything and anything I can to get sober and stay sober. This is it. Like, if I can't do it this time, and I'd made, there was a switch flicked in my head that day, and I was just like, I've got to do this. And that was the 19th of August 2020, which was my first sober date. And
Awesome.
I don't know if you can see that there. Yeah,
Yep.
we'll be back to
Wow.
front, but I'll flip it. Yeah.
So
but yeah,
cool.
so yeah, and then that was 5 and a bit years ago. So yeah, that's
This
the
is
story.
incredible. Wow. So, I mean, I kept listening to just every story, every up and down, and I'm like, the show being called Rock Bottom, I'm kind of like, which one would I choose as Rock Bottom? But it's like your story reminds me a lot of what I went through with like the ups, the downs, the toxic relationships, the relationships that like involve drinking, the attempts to get sober and get it under control, get jobs that, kept me away from alcohol and stuff like that, and just kept coming back to bite you every time, it sounded like, no matter how hard you tried to quit.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, for the most part, there wasn't even really that many efforts to actually quit. There was a couple in there, but they were half-arsed. I think towards
Like
the end,
slowing down kind of thing.
yeah, towards the end, after my stint in rehab, there was a few kind of real attempts at it, but the world was against me in my mind, and it was like, that was it. When I went back up to my flat, and she'd said to me, oh, we're not going to get back together, and I had this inkling that they were together and doing something. My first thought was, well, I'm going to go and get some drink. And it was like, I'll show them. Like, what was I? I was proving to them that I was a hopeless drunk. Do you know what I mean? In my mind, though, that was like, I'll show them. I'll teach them a lesson. This is exactly what they've been telling you are, So I don't think that they're definitely, like, I've spoken to her, and we've sorted stuff out. And in the fellowship, they're like, you have to make amends and all that. There's certain people that I just will not make amends to, because he was a snake in the grass, and he took
Yeah.
advantage of someone that was going through a pretty rough time. Her boyfriend had kind of ended up in rehab and all of that, and
She was in a vulnerable spot.
she was in a vulnerable spot, and
And
he took
preyed on
advantage
her.
of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, as I say, she seems to be doing well. I haven't spoken to her in years, but it's I've definitely forgiven that, and but I wasn't a good person at that point as well. So I'm not blameless, but I just think to make me feel as bad as I was, think that I was going mad. You know what I mean? Because I'd still remember that time, and it was like I just was like,
Your
am I
head was
going
going
mad?
crazy.
Am I making this up in my head? Is this all in my head? Is this what alcohol's doing to me? In actual
Yeah.
fact, no, it was,
When we're angry and we're seeing red and we're just coping with it with just alcohol, it just fuels the fire, you know?
yeah,
You start building up these scenarios in your head. And then this time, when you're right, that just confirms it. And that makes you want to go even darker, So
yeah, yeah.
it's a
No,
frightening thing. But
oh,
like
it's a
after,
horrible thing.
so after you had that moment, because when I've been talking to a lot of people lately and I've been asking more about these, like this moment where they're like, they've been sober ever since and like something just clicked, and
Mm,
that was just like me in the hospital a little over a year ago when I had agreed to finally go to rehab. It was like this nun that apparently worked at the hospital that I happened to be at. She was a nun and she used to read people's rights
mhm,
before they passed away and stuff. And she recognized my name from childhood, where she was a nun at this elementary school I was at 30 years before that.
mhm.
And she recognized my name on this list. It wasn't the list of people that were dying, I don't think, but she just recognized my name after 30 years. And she kept coming to my room to visit me and check on me and pray for me every day for that whole week I was in there. And it's just like, once that kept happening, I just kept noticing all these signs. I'm like, here I am in the hospital, probably for the fifth time this year for another alcohol related reason. It's like, I can't do this anymore, And then I'm
Yeah.
just like, take me to treatment, and I've been okay ever since. But so when you had that moment where just like everything clicked, did you say the second I get out of the hospital, I'm going to put in this work? Did you ever have to go back to treatment, or did you use the tools you learned the first time in treatment? How'd that go?
Yeah, so I mean, the first treatment that I'd been in, I learned a lot. I did a lot of meditation. I did a mixture of like fellowship tools and smart tools. But I think what happened on the 19th was like I was like, if I don't do it this time, then this is going to kill me. Like this. I mean, like touch wood, all of my my liver function tests and all that, they're all okay. I never got to,
Never got
liver,
cirrhosis or anything?
never got cirrhosis. So, and I don't know how, because I know people that are younger and didn't drink what I drank, and they are not well, and well, one of them since passed actually. But I just knew that if I continued down the path that I was, because like my parents didn't want me about my like I just met my nephew who's now he turned 6 a few weeks ago, and it was just I just met him on his first birthday, and I was like, I want to have a relationship with these kids, and I was like, I don't want to be just like, oh yeah. Oh, did I have an uncle? Yeah, you did, but we don't talk about him. He's gone. Do you know what I mean? That I don't want to be, and then
Yeah.
I don't want to be another statistic, because that's all we become. Oh, it's just another dead drunk, or another drunken bum that's, adding to the negative stigma that surrounds alcoholism and drug addiction. And I didn't want to do that. And then, so I started going to the meetings, and I did CA, I did NA, I did AA, I did SMART, I did the drugs and alcohol team. I was doing Zoom meetings with my old treatment center. And I think I got to about 100 days. And somebody talked about 90 meetings in 90 days. And I was like, oh, because some days I was doing two, so I was like, I smashed that out the park without even realizing it, because I wasn't working at that point, and I was like, I'm going to throw every. And once I started talking in the meetings, which I think like maybe took me one or two meetings to do, I loved it, and I would come out of there buzzing, like
Same here. It was
absolutely
like a drug
buzzing.
for me.
Yeah, yeah, and I would be like, I'd be getting antsy if I had a day where there maybe wasn't one scheduled, and I was like, and because it was COVID time, so I was like finding them on Zoom. I was having meetings in Utah, in Idaho. I was going to like Australia. It was just
Yeah.
like, I was
That's
like, this is
crazy.
amazin, man,
Yeah.
So I had like
So many resources.
I had a weird little home group in Utah for a while, and it was awesome. And there was another guy from rehab, and he got into that one as well, and I think nobody seems to have heard from him for a long time. I don't know whether he's changed his phones, come off the socials, but no one can seem to track him down. So I don't know what's happened to him. But actually, since 3 people that I know of, all younger than me, possibly one a year older than me, have all since passed from alcoholism and
Yeah.
treatment. Do you know what I mean? Like they're too young to be dying from alcoholism. It's
And
horrible.
that's just another reminder as to why we want to
Yeah.
stay sober and why we're, you and I are both kind of going out of our way to speak to people in recovery and try to get the word out there, so
Yeah, without a
try.
doubt. And I, you know what? It's like having people on the podcast and telling their stories. Like I had someone on who's going to be in the next couple of weeks. Well, he didn't have a problem with alcohol, but he could foresee the chance that it might become a problem. And he was like, why do I want to take that risk? Why do I want to run that gauntlet? So
And there's
he's
so
just like,
much evidence of what it does to us,
yeah. Well, it's like everyone out there that drinks is, in my mind, playing a risky game, because we're only like a couple of shady incidents where you then use alcohol as a tool from becoming dependent on it, because it is a drug. And the more you use it, the more you can become dependent on it. It's
Yeah.
Sober October at the moment. And I think that I heard about someone that's like, I think what are we on today? It's the 9th. It was 8 days and they'd already drank for 4 of the 8 days. So it's like, well, you're not doing Sober October. So
No, sober is sober, it's
exactly. So,
yeah.
and I just think it's that whole thing. If you're giving up for a month and you're struggling to give up for a month, then you need to look at your behaviors and habits with that, because you shouldn't have to struggle to give up something for a month. It
Yeah,
shouldn't be
that
difficult.
is a huge key that there might be a problem, if you can't quit, just if you make a bet with yourself, hey, 30 days is 30 days. That's the longest of sobriety I ever had, up
Yeah.
from age 18 to 37 was the longest amount of sobriety I ever had, was 30 days. And I did it just to prove that I could go 30 days. But on day 31, I just went balls to the wall, So
Yeah.
it's,
But like you're saying, you were white knuckling it, weren't you? You were like,
oh, yeah, I didn't do any
looks like-
meetings. I didn't do anything. I was stressed the entire time. I hated it. I was taking Xanax, which doesn't count as sobriety, and that wasn't helping. And
Yeah.
it was miserable. But
Yeah.
so, like, in the last 5 years and 2 months, have you had any moments that you consider weak moments where you were struggling and you had to figure out some kind of advice to get out of it, or did you call somebody, or what ways do you deal with those tough moments these days?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I'm quite a stubborn person, I think, and I'm very, like, what's the word? Like, I'm very strong-willed and like I don't ask for help, and I think that was my main problem when I was drinking. But when I did ask for help and I got sober, good. But like, I think now that I'm sober, I'm just like, nah, that's it. I'm not going back there. Don't get me wrong, the first year was just, I wouldn't say it was plain sailing, but I was doing meetings like 3 times a week. Obviously, after the first 100, and I went down to like maybe 3 a week because I was working as well. So it like the whole recovery world consumed my every being for the first year, maybe 2 years, because I was doing a daily reprieve on Instagram. I did a post every single day for the first 500 days of my sobriety, and so I was doing that. I was working, setting up my own gardening business. I'd moved into a new flat. I think the only time I really struggled, and I wouldn't even say it was a struggle, was when I moved into the new flat and I'd put everything, not a flat, sorry, it was a cottage, put everything in its place, and I'd sat down. I was sat on my own, like my family had helped me move in, and I was sat there on my own with Poppy the cat that evening, and I was like, I could go and get some wine now, couldn't I? And it was just that instant little thought. And then I was like, yeah, but one bottle wouldn't be enough, would it? And then you would have to take the car back down there drunken. And then,
Risk
so
it all.
I was playing the tape forward. I was playing it because then I was like, well, then I would get a DUI and I'd lose my car. And then I would lose my job because I couldn't do my job. I need my
Yep.
car for my stuff. So it was like, and it was very simple, and it just went. But I think because that decision on the 19th of August I made, I was like, I'm not going to drink again, because I'd done so many different relapses, and I was just like, I'm done now. So yeah, don't get me wrong. There has been little fleeting moments, and it's like, oh, you could have a drink and you get a drunk. But honestly, Nah, man. Once I got past the first 3 months, nah, it was like,
The same here.
never going to drink again.
After I got through that 90 days, you know, after getting out of treatment, 45 days in treatment, after I got past that 90, I did like 118 meetings in 90 days. I mean,
Wow.
so
Yeah.
I know the program's not for everybody, but it has been a lifesaver for me in a lot of ways.
Without a doubt for
But
me.
there's this thing I've been talking about lately with people is the replaying the tape in your head, which is the
Mhm.
difference now when we're getting sober and want to stay sober. I feel like the difference is we are replaying the tape in our head. We're thinking of all the consequences. We're looking back at where I was a year and 1 month ago in a dark room, chugging out of a wine bag full of, or a bag full of wine, basically, that I took out of a box, in bed shaking. You know, I'm just kind of like, talking to other people that are whether they're newly sober or sober 5 years and 2 months. It's like replaying the tape is everything. Not that you want to, you know, replay it in your head all the time, but when you have those weak moments where you're like, okay, well, this is what's going to happen. It's never
Mhm.
going to be just a drink, you know. It's not going to be that one bottle.
No, and I think, like someone told me you should never forget like where your darkest days were. Like you should always, what did they say? You should always like just glance at the past, never stare. Don't stare into that abyss. Just but glance back and never forget it. Like I don't ever want to forget how bad I was before getting there. Because I think if you forget about it, you'd be like, oh, was it really that bad? I think you need to make a conscious kind of
Yeah.
effort to go, no, it fucking was that bad. You don't ever
Mm-hmm.
want to go back there. And I think someone asked me back in maybe it was 2 years or something, a friend of mine said, so do you think you'll ever have a drink again? And I said, and at this point I was like, never say never, one day at a time, and I said, listen, I said, like, if there's a 0.01% chance that I'll go back to where I was, like,
It's not worth it.
my drinking habits, like, why would I want to take that chance? For what? For like, a glass of wine or a beer on a sunset or whatever, just for like what, a little tiny buzz? And I said, but the chances of me going back to where I was by like 3 days from now is more like 99.9%. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm not naive enough to think that length of time between your
Doesn't, you know.
drinking day and your sober day does it, it doesn't go, it never goes away. And I know that, because I've
Exactly.
heard stories of people, in fact, I've known people that have gone back out and they've gone back to where they were within a few days. And that's when the alcohol poisoning comes in, because your body's not used to like I'd go back out and I'd probably think I could drink a liter bottle of vodka again. My body would,
No, just, yeah,
I'd
knocks
be
you out.
drunk on a freaking, I don't know, a baby sham at this point,
Yeah. I mean,
because
when we're on our like binges, you know, like I've gone on, I've put myself in the hospital many times, and then when they test my BAC, they're like, "Oh, you're at like a 0.32 and you're functioning and having full conversations." I'm like, this would kill most people, and here I am, you know, functioning on it. So then like I'd have like a couple weeks of sobriety, and I'd be like, "All right, I'm going back at it," and then I would just be like throwing up the next morning and blackout, you know, just like thinking I could keep up with myself a few weeks prior, you know. So,
yeah. But I
so
just
like,
don't understand why people still continue to do it, because it's such a poison, and it's just like they're only getting like 10 or maybe an hour tops of actual fun drinking time, and the rest of it is just kind of,
yeah.
sad drunken
Exactly.
nonsense that comes out of them.
Yeah, I feel like the older I got, the less fun it became. There would be some moments of fun, but then, you know, the more I got dependent on it, and I wasn't drinking because I was having a good time anymore. I was drinking because I felt like my body required it, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And that just got exhausting. I mean, when I was in my 20s, I could, you know, be hungover. I could do cocaine all night and then wake up and go to work, and then nobody'd know the difference. And
Yeah.
then fast forward 10 years, I'd do the same thing and I would be in bed for 4 days. So it'd just be
Without a
not
doubt,
fun
man.
anymore.
Without a doubt.
So just a few closing questions. Like, what inspired you to start the podcast and get into like helping others with recovery? Like, how did you get into that and when?
Well, like I said, so the addiction charity that I kind of work for over here, Motivate, that's where I did a lot of the meetings. And even though they're not affiliated with a fellowship, we still use their rooms to do the meetings there. And I think they had a first kind of intake of peer mentors, and I think I was maybe 18 months at that point. And they asked me, and I said no. I said I don't think I'm not ready myself to do that. There's other things that I want to do, build my business up and all that before I do that. So the second lot, I was like, yeah, I'll come in and do that. So now I'm a fully qualified peer mentor. But when I first got sober, I was doing we went into lockdown again, and I was about 6 months sober, and I started doing little videos in my bedroom at my parents' house for YouTube, just like thoughts and how I got sober. And these were just like almost like every other day I was doing a video. And then I went back to work and it slowed down, but I put out a lot of content, and then I was like, I really want to do a podcast. And then I transcribed well, not transcribed them, but I turned all those into audio and I put them out as a podcast. So this was like 4 years ago, and they didn't really do well because it was just me talking and they were only like 12 minutes long. They worked better as a kind of video representation because I moved into my car and I didn't live in my car. I moved the YouTubes into the car. Anyway, so I did that, and it was this January, I was kind of like, I really want to do a podcast again. I just kind of thought, because I thought like the meetings and the stories and the shares in those rooms are what helped me get sober. And I thought that's what we need more of. Do you know what I mean? I know there's a whole ton of podcasts out there and there's some great ones. And I just thought, I know some really good people, some really interesting people on Instagram, and I want to hear their stories. Like, because some of them, I'm hearing their stories for the first time as well, like yourself. And I want to hear those. And I think that is what the essence of recovery, the essence of the fellowship and the meetings and SMART, that's what helps people. Like the tools are great, but the stories are what helped me. So
The
I just thought,
connections, the relatability.
yeah. And I just thought, because those meetings are like anonymous, you can't share what's in the rooms. So I thought I need to put it out in a podcast. So that's essentially what it is. And do you know what, man? I love doing it. I love speaking to people like yourself and Jen, who I just had on before on my podcast. And it's just, yeah. And it's, you know what? It's growing slowly at the beginning, but it's getting quite good traction now. So, I know
Yeah.
we're in a niche market, so we're never going to be Joe Rogan, but I
I know.
love doing what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Same here. I've been doing this, I think on the 15th will be 90 days of doing the podcast and stuff. And I
Wow.
just,
Wow.
it's at first, you don't know who's going to be listening to it and all that, but you're just building relationships with people, social
Yeah.
media and stuff. It all just, if it's meant to be, it comes together, people, as long as it's helping somebody, I'm happy, and,
Exactly my thoughts, man. Exactly
and I
my
feel like
thoughts.
even though we're in a niche market, there's a lot of recovery podcasts. I feel like I've watched yours. I know what mine's about. I've watched a bunch of others, and everybody is unique in their own way. I think,
Oh,
just
of
the way they
course.
interview and
Do you know
yeah,
what? Like, I think I listen to so many different podcasts, and when they go off and they have like a season break, I'm like, oh, where is it gone? Do you know what I mean? And then I'll maybe
yeah,
find another one
exactly.
to fill that hole. But at work, I listen to, I'll go through phases of listening to, I like a little bit of true crime. Don't get me wrong, I like that, and I listen to that on my podcast. But there's always a recovery podcast episode that I'll be listening to at least daily. So I still do that even now, 5 years and 3 months.
Yeah, and it's
It's
helping you, and you
crazy.
have your own podcast, but you still listen to others'
Oh,
podcasts,
without
and
a doubt, man.
that just
Yeah,
says how effective they are for somebody who's 5 years and 2 months and is still practicing listening to these things, and it's helping you. Like that just shows how powerful these things are.
absolutely, man.
So
Absolutely. I
that's why
thrive on them. Yeah.
yeah. So what? Just to close up a little bit, what advice would you give to any of my listeners that are new to recovery, sober curious, just want to hear what Jimmy Thistle's opinion is on what it takes to thrive in recovery?
Yeah, connection, man. It's always been about connection. Support comes from connection, and yeah, thriving comes from connection. And whether it's not just in the rooms, like if you're someone that doesn't want to go to a meeting for whatever reason, and I get that, that's always what I first tell people when they message me or DM me. I'm like, get to the meetings. I don't care if you don't believe in God or this or that. Just go and try it. Yeah, if it's not for you, message people online. Most of the people that I know, like everyone that I speak to, who either has like 100,000 followers or 20 followers, their DMs are always open because we're in this community that we want to support and help people. And just by messaging someone, whether it be me, you, or whoever, just connect with someone and speak to them and ask them what they did. It might work for you, it might not. But if you ask like 20 people and get a different bit of advice from each person, one of those bits of advice is going to work, but probably all of them will work. And for me, my recovery is it's a bit of smart. It's a bit of AA, CA, NA. It's a bit of stuff I watched on YouTube. It's films that I watched. It's podcasts. You know, I was like basically getting the spaghetti, chucking it against the wall and seeing what stuck. And you know what? It's like, you know, so I don't have any definitive way that I got sober. But for me, it was all about connection. Back at the beginning when we went, you know, like I found my little tribe and we went out, we went hiking, you know, we even went out on a Christmas dinner. We all went and had pizza. And it was one of the cheapest nights out I'd ever had. I was like, what? You know, like I've had a Sprite and a pizza and it cost me about 20 quid. And that was my Christmas night out. You know, that wouldn't
Yeah.
have even been
Possible back in the day.
Exactly. But I think that's the main thing, connection, to get the support that you need. Because if you think you're on your own, you're really not. But if you stay on your own, then you're going to struggle.
Well said. I was going to ask you if you have a quote that you live by, that you'd like to share, but you just kind of said a quote, but I always like to kind of.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if that was a quote from anyone else, but I'll take it if it sounded like a quote. I'll take it as mine. But no, you know, I listen to your podcast quite regularly, Ryan, and I'm nearly up to date with them all. But I've got a few more to smash.
I've been listening to yours too at the gym, and it's really nice.
Yeah, good man. But I think this one, like they always. So there's a guy called. Well, there's a king of Scotland called Robert the Bruce. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was in Braveheart, but he got a bit of a bad rap in Braveheart. But he was one of the best kings of Scotland because he defeated the English in a place called Bannockburn in 1314, I believe. Anyway, he was he was wounded. He was basically beaten into a cave, and he was basically, his side was going to lose. The English were going to take over Scotland again. And the story goes, and it's probably just a myth, but the story goes that he was watching this spider in the cave trying to weave a web, and it kept on falling down, and it just was like, what's going on? And then it got back up, and then it was weaving, and I don't know how long he was in this cave while people are fighting outside, but anyway, it's a good story. So this spider eventually managed to make this perfect web. So he went back out and he got his troops rallied together, and anyway, they beat the English. And his quote is, if at first you don't succeed, try again. So, you know, and I think whether or not he said it or whether it's just been attributed to him because, you know, English got beaten that day. But for me, it's the same with alcohol, you know, and addiction. If at first you don't succeed, keep trying, man, because I wouldn't be here if I'd given up on the first relapse, you know. And it's very easy to think, oh my God, I can never do this. I just keep falling. Relapse is part of recovery. Without a doubt. There's maybe 1% or 2% of people that get sober the first time and stay sober, and good luck to them. But the majority of us struggle for a while, and then
we need the extra lessons to really build on it, and that foundation. When we hit rock bottom, we can build that foundation on it. You know,
exactly, man.
Instead of keep going lower. So
yeah,
thank you so much. Really appreciate you being on the show. Like, this was a fun interview, and I was looking forward to it, and it was worth all the excitement. So.
Yeah, me too, man. And I have to say, you know, we need to put a little shout out to Ratchet Rachel, or just Rachel, because she's messaged me, and I said, "Oh, you're not going to be on with Ryan when we do the podcast." So she's a bit gutted. I'm a bit gutted that I don't get.
I know. I was sad she couldn't either. Like she's 3 hours past me, and she is working the day job, and I wanted her on too because she was excited about the interview. And
you guys are in 3 hour difference time zone, are you?
Yeah. So sometimes we have trouble scheduling to co-host together, so it gets a little difficult.
I forget that you guys have got like I don't know, 7 time zones in the US or something crazy.
Yeah, too many. Yeah. Too many. So I'll be probably going over to Florida to do some more episodes with her in person and stuff. But
I'm going to get her scheduled to come on after hours with Jimmy Thistle at some point.
Definitely do. Yeah, she's incredible story and so honest. So yeah.
Without a doubt.
It's hard not to like Ratchet Rachel. She's pretty awesome.
Exactly. Yeah, well, my initials were J Raw, so that was my initials. So I was always like, oh, it's my hip hop name. No, J Raw was my raw, drunken alter ego. J Raw.
It was like my nickname. Everyday RPK was
RPK. Yeah,
Ryan's drunk every day. No slowing down.
No slowing down ever. Yeah. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah. Cheers.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Really appreciate it.
Rock Bottom with Ryan. No bullshit, just recovery.